What if everything you were taught about the origin of civilization was backwards? What if farming didn't create civilization, but civilization created farming? Today, we're traveling to southeastern Turkey, to a hill that was once dismissed as just another pile of rocks, until archaeologists realized those rocks were massive stone pillars, deliberately carved, arranged, and buried over 11,000 years ago. No cities, no metal tools, no written language, and yet somehow, this site may be older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, and powerful enough to force historians to rewrite the human timeline. This is Göbekli Tepe, and by the end of this video, you might start wondering whether we truly understand where civilization came from, or whether we've been telling ourselves a very comfortable story. So stick around, because this one changes everything. Let's start with the basics. Göbekli Tepe was discovered in the 1990s and dates back to roughly 9,600 BCE. That's about 6,000 years before Stonehenge and 7,000 years before the pyramids. The site consists of massive T-shaped limestone pillars, some weighing 10 to 20 tons, arranged in circular enclosures, decorated with carvings of animals, foxes, snakes, birds, boars. And here's the first big problem for the official story. Göbekli Tepe was built before agriculture. According to traditional history, humans were hunter-gatherers, too busy chasing food to build monuments. Civilization came after farming. But Göbekli Tepe says, actually, no. This wasn't a random campsite. This was planned, engineered, symbolic construction, which raises a very uncomfortable question. Who organized this, and why? How do we know Göbekli Tepe is over 11,000 years old? So here's the big question everyone asks. How do we actually know Göbekli Tepe is that old? Short answer, not guesses, not vibes, and not one single test. It's dated using multiple independent methods, and they all point to the same early time frame. First, radiocarbon dating. You can't date stone, but archaeologists dated charcoal, animal bones, and organic remains found inside the construction layers of Göbekli Tepe. These samples consistently date to around 9,600 BCE, placing the site firmly in the pre-pottery Neolithic period. That's already thousands of years before Stonehenge or the pyramids. Next is stratigraphy, or how the site is layered. The oldest layer, known as Layer 3, contains the massive T-shaped pillars and circular enclosures. Above that is Layer 2, which shows simpler, later buildings. This tells us something crucial. The most advanced construction came first, not last. That alone breaks the traditional timeline. Then there's the stone tools. Thousands of flint tools were found, and they perfectly match technology from the same early Neolithic period. No metal, no pottery, no wheels. Everything lines up with the radiocarbon dates. And here's a big one. No agriculture. The earliest layers contain only wild plants and animals. No domesticated crops, which means Göbekli Tepe was built before farming, not after it. In fact, evidence suggests farming may have developed because sites like this needed to feed large groups of people. Finally, and this is often overlooked, Göbekli Tepe was intentionally buried. The enclosures weren't destroyed or abandoned. They were carefully filled in, and the material used to bury them dates to the same period as their construction. That confirms the timeline and tells us the builders themselves closed the site. So here's the takeaway. Göbekli Tepe isn't controversial because we don't know how old it is. It's controversial because we do. And the date forces us to rethink when civilization really began. Here's where things get interesting. Göbekli Tepe appears to be a ritual or ceremonial complex, built by coordinated labor, requiring planning, leadership, and shared belief systems. In other words, culture before cities. Some researchers now suggest religion may have come before agriculture. Large gatherings required food production. Farming may have been invented to support ritual centers. That flips the entire narrative. Instead of, we farmed, then built monuments, it becomes, we gathered for something important, and then needed food. And if that's true, Göbekli Tepe isn't just old, it's foundational. Now here's where speculation begins, clearly labeled, but fascinating. Göbekli Tepe wasn't destroyed. It was carefully buried, layer by layer, stone by stone, almost like someone wanted it preserved. This wasn't erosion. This wasn't abandonment. This was intentional. Why? Some theories suggest a ritual closing of the site, a cultural or religious shift, environmental changes after the Ice Age, or knowledge being deliberately hidden. And remember, this happens right around the time of rapid climate change, rising sea levels, the end of the Younger Dryas period. Coincidence? Maybe. But it's curious that so many ancient myths talk about lost ages, floods, knowledge from before the reset. Now let's be very clear. Göbekli Tepe does not prove aliens, lost supertech civilizations, ancient lasers or flying machines. But it does suggest something equally disruptive. Humans were more organized, symbolic, and capable much earlier than we thought. And maybe, just maybe, advanced knowledge doesn't always leave behind skyscrapers and machines. Sometimes it leaves stone, symbolism, alignment, memory, which connects directly to the Sphinx water erosion debate, underground structures at Giza, the idea that later civilizations may have inherited knowledge. Göbekli Tepe forces us to ask, how many sites like this existed? And how many are now underwater, buried, or unexplored? Why does this discovery make a lot of people uncomfortable? Because Göbekli Tepe doesn't just challenge history books. It challenges certainty. It suggests that our timeline might be incomplete. Progress isn't linear. Civilizations can rise, fall, and vanish without leaving obvious traces. And institutions don't love rewriting foundations. Not because of a conspiracy necessarily, but because uncertainty is harder to manage than a clean story. But history isn't clean. It's messy, fragmented, and often missing pieces.
They literally covered ruins in concrete, which again is just another example of something that is now preventing a full excavation of this site. And by the way, Necmi Karul denied the destruction and apparently got very upset about it. But perhaps the most provocative claim I made in my prior video involved the World Economic Forum's apparent association with this site.
Now that we've covered the solid science and dating of Göbekli Tepe, let's take a brief detour into the wild side of interpretations. The theories that make even seasoned archaeologists raise an eyebrow. Göbekli Tepe is so old and mysterious that it's practically a magnet for speculation. Some of it intriguing, some of it, well, pretty out there. 1. A lost advanced civilization. One of the most popular fringe ideas, championed by authors like Graham Hancock, is that Göbekli Tepe was not the product of regular hunter-gatherers at all, but the legacy of a lost advanced civilization wiped out by a global cataclysm. They argue that the complexity and scale of the site would have required advanced knowledge. This civilization passed its knowledge on after surviving a disaster, possibly a comet impact or massive climate shift. Mainstream scholars, however, point out that the apparent jump in capability can be explained by gradual cultural evolution, and there's no concrete evidence of such a vanished society. This version keeps popping up, partly because it sounds like a missing chapter of history, and partly because it fits in with flood myths and ancient memory. But again, it remains speculative. 2. The Great Flood and Noah's Ark connection. Another fascinating idea connects Göbekli Tepe with ancient flood legends. Like the story of Noah's Ark in the Bible and similar tales from many cultures around the world. Some writers see animal carvings on pillars representing species being gathered or corralled, symbols that resemble themes of water or descent. a location in a region that could have been affected by late Ice Age flooding. There's even a suggestion that the site was built as a ritual or cultural response to cataclysms that ancient peoples preserved in story. But here's the big caveat. The timing doesn't line up with traditional flood myths like Noah's. Those stories date to much later periods, while Göbekli Tepe predates them by thousands of years. But hey, a lot of things we thought we knew are starting to lose their footing. 3. Suppressed history or hidden knowledge. Finally, there's a motive theory, that important information about Göbekli Tepe is being withheld, either by archaeologists, governments, or other powerful groups, because it would overturn established history. This theory often includes claims that excavations are slow on purpose. Full data isn't being shared. Archaeology is resisting change. It's worth noting that archaeologists reject these ideas, not because they want to hide something, but because excavation is slow and careful for scientific reasons. They stress that bulldozing the site wouldn't reveal secrets, it would destroy them. Some theories about Göbekli Tepe are grounded in evidence. Others tap into myths, global flood stories, or ideas of lost civilizations. None of them are proven, but each shows how much we don't yet know, and how hungry people are to fill in the blanks. So what do you think? Is Göbekli Tepe the birthplace of organized religion? Evidence of a forgotten chapter of human history? Or simply proof that we underestimated our ancestors? Does it connect to the pyramids? The Sphinx? Other ancient sites that appear far too advanced for their age? Or are we just scratching the surface of something much bigger? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We read them all. If this video made you rethink the human timeline, give it a like and consider subscribing. It lets me know that you are interested in these videos, and it helps me continue exploring the stories that don't always make the headlines. And remember, sometimes the biggest secrets aren't hidden in the future. They're buried in the past. We'll see you next time.